she'll make you smile, and I hope you will make her feel very welcome. Ellie used to come here some years ago. I don't know. Oh, I was going to say 7. Something like that. So, yeah. So, she was once sitting there. So, anyway, I'm not going to... You haven't grown, but no, I'm still trying. Anyway, we're going to pray for Ellie, and then she's going to share with us tonight. Lord, I thank you. You are so good to us, and you long to be in a relationship with us. And so now, as we listen and learn a bit more about you tonight, I pray, Lord Jesus, you will draw us closer to you. Give us ears to listen. And I just pray you will encourage our hearts tonight through Ellie and bless her as she speaks. Amen. One thing, there will be people around at the end, some of us hanging in the back. If you want to talk or pray with anyone, there'll be people around. So we didn't mention that in the notices, so I'm just highlighting. Okay. This microphone or that one?
I don't know what that is. Can you hear me? Yeah. Oh, cool. Hi everyone. How are you? Had a nice night so far? Yeah? Good. Okay, so as Maxine said, yeah, I'm Ellie. So I was at YF about 7 years ago. And YF played a really important part of laying the foundations for my faith. So I still meet up with a lot of the friends that I made here, and I'm sure you guys will be too down the line. So yeah, it's really nice to be back and to meet you all and to see that it's still going and you're having a good time. So today I'm going to try and carry on with the theme that you guys were doing before. So encounters with Jesus and others encountering Jesus through us. So to do this, I'm going to first look at a passage from the Bible, and then talk a little bit about my own story, and then just end with some little practical tips that you can go home with. Okay. Has anyone actually got a Bible with them? No? That's fine. I brought mine. I almost forgot it. I was walking out the door and then remembered, so that would have been a bad start, hey? So, we're going to read from Ezekiel 47, verses 1 to 12. And the context is, so it's in the Old Testament. Ezekiel is a prophet that was living in a place called Babylon, following the Israelites, so God's people being exiled there. He was like God's spokesperson, if you like, at the time, and was given many different visions for God's people. So we're going to look at one of those today, and it's called The River from the Temple. It's quite a long passage, so just bear with me, but really try and listen. If it helps to close your eyes and try and envision it, because it's very descriptive, then feel free, but don't fall asleep. Okay, so the river from the temple. The man brought me back to the entrance to the temple, and I saw water coming out from under the threshold of the temple towards the east, for the temple faced east. The water was coming down from under the south side of the temple, south of the altar. He then brought me out through the north gate and led me round the outside to the outer gate facing east, and water was trickling from the south side. As the man went eastward with a measuring line in his hand, he measured off 1,000 cubits, and then led me through the water that was ankle deep. He measured off another 1,000 cubits, and led me through water that was knee deep. He measured off another 1,000, and led me through water that was up to the waist. He measured off another 1,000, but now it was a river that could not be crossed, because the water had risen and was deep enough to swim in, a river that no one could cross. He asked me, "Son of man, do you see this?" Then he led me back to the bank of the river. When I arrived there, I saw a great number of trees on each side of the river. He said to me, "This water flows towards the eastern region and goes down into Arabah, where it enters the Dead Sea. When it enters into the sea, the salty water there becomes fresh. Swarms of living creatures will live wherever the river flows. There will be large numbers of fish because this water flows there and makes the salt water fresh. So where the river flows, everything will live. Fishermen will stand along the shore from En-Gedi to En-Gleim, and there will be places for spreading nets. The fish will be of many kinds, like the fish of the Mediterranean Sea. But the swamps and marshes will not become fresh, they will be left for salt. Fruit trees of all kinds will grow on both banks of the river. Their leaves will not wither, nor will their fruit fail. Every month they will bear fruit, because the water from the sanctuary flows to them. Their fruit will serve for food, and their leaves for healing." Thanks for bearing with me, that's quite a long one. Okay, so let's try and break that passage down together. There's a whole lot in that. A lot of it sounds a little bit confusing, and we could do many different talks from it, but we're going to focus on three things. So the river, the trees, and the fruit. So it's quite specific imagery for those in Babylon at the time, but like much of the Bible, it is still relevant for us today. And I personally have really felt God speak to me through this passage. Okay, so starting off with the river. The river that it talks about comes from the temple or the sanctuary. It makes everything in it alive. It makes salt water fresh, and it is a river that feeds the trees beside it. So for me, this kind of represents God's presence and his anointing. This isn't the first time that God has used imagery like this in the Bible. So in Jeremiah, the book before, set at the same sort of time, he refers to God as the spring of living water. Then in the New Testament, in John 4, we see Jesus talking to the woman at the well, maybe some of you know the story, and refers to what he can offer as living water, and whoever drinks from it will never thirst. And again, later in chapter 7, he refers to himself as living water when he's teaching his followers. So it's imagery that we're probably familiar with, so just kind of keep this in mind as we carry on through the passage, that God is the river. Okay? You with me so far? So next, the trees. So the trees planted beside the river, these represent us. So followers of Jesus with our roots in the water of life, which is him, which allows us to grow and to bear fruit. So in practice, what does it look like to be a tree and have your roots planted in the river? Well, spending time with Jesus, giving him time and space to encounter him day to day, having him as our source of life and hope, which we'll talk more about later. Then the passage says, fruit trees of all kinds will grow on both banks of the river. Their leaves will not wither, nor will their fruit fail. Every month they will bear fruit because the water from the sanctuary flows to them. Their fruit will serve for food and their leaves for healing. So what happens when we live a life with our roots in the river? We bear fruit. Simple, third part. So we need to realise that this is something that is going to happen if we stay connected to God and to the river. It's like Jesus himself says in John 15, when he says that I am the vine and you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. So both of these images, Old Testament, New Testament, promises that living a life plugged into Jesus, fruit will grow from us. Okay, so an important point to make now, and bear with me with this. A mango tree will never know what a mango tastes like. Or an apple tree, I don't think will ever know what an apple tastes like. So this fruit isn't for us, it's for those around us. And it's a way of enabling those people in our life, or the people that we spend our time with, to encounter Jesus for themselves. So for me, this is quite encouraging because it takes the pressure off us a little bit. Our job is to stay connected to Jesus, our roots in the river, and he promises we will bear fruit if we do that. But then it's not down to us how it's distributed or decide where it's used, but God will do that. We might not even see the benefits of the fruit that we're growing, but that doesn't matter. We have to trust that God can see it and is using it to build his kingdom. Okay, so that's the passage. What has this looked like for me, and just a little bit about my story. So growing up, I had a lot of Christian input in my life. So I was really blessed. I had a Christian family that took me to church. I came to AYF. I had lots of Christian friends, and it was a nice time for me to kind of build what I would describe as a solid foundation for my own faith. Then when I left AYF, I went to Manchester for university. I studied to become a midwife there. Does everyone know what a midwife does? I sometimes get people ask. So I deliver babies. That's my job. So I studied midwifery and I lived there for 5 years. So during that time, I never walked away from my faith, I would say, but I definitely held it at arm's length a little bit at times. Recently, I kind of feel like God gave me a picture that really describes how it was for me at the time. So it was like growing up pre-Manchester, I built this foundation, right, with my faith. And then on top of that, when I moved away, I started building my house. So imagine my faith as a house. But the whole house was just at a bit of an angle, and I wasn't quite doing it right. And it was like I was in Manchester, I was starting to build, but not very well. It was all skew-if. I love that word, but I tried to spell it for this and it didn't look very good, but it's QF. So yeah, I was in Manchester for 5 years, 3 of which I was in a relationship with a guy who was like my best friend. I was working at the hospital that I trained in, I was living with my friends. And for the most part, I was very happy, but I had a feeling of just like not feeling fully peaceful. It was like my house was just at an angle. I wasn't really including God in a lot of my decisions, and I was trying to make them on my own. I kept making alterations to the house, if you like, and like trying to help the building become more straight, but it wasn't quite working. It's like, you know, if you've got a house that's kind of, imagine a house that's skew-if and you're trying to add a little bit of wood here and a bit of something to hold it up here. That's what I was trying to do. So that wasn't really working. And then it was like one day I took a step back and saw the house, so my life, at this funny angle, and knew it wasn't ever going to be strong enough by doing these little patch jobs. So at this point, I handed my notice in the job I was in. I ended the relationship I was in because the boy I was with wasn't bringing me closer to Jesus, which was really hard, but we kind of knew that nothing was going to change. And I left the city where all my closest friends were and came back to Birmingham. Woo! So it was like I finally decided to take the house down. The foundation was still there, but I needed to start again and start this time doing it right and building it, me and God together. So I'll be fully transparent. This was really, really difficult for a long time. I was starting to rebuild and try not to miss what I'd walked away from. But God is so good and incredibly gracious. I feel like he spoke and taught me a lot during this time. So going back to the passage that we were talking about, I was trying to keep my roots in the river. I was really trying to spend time with God and hear what he was saying, which I hadn't really been doing before, but could feel myself starting to grow. At this point, I was having lots of uncertainties about my job. Wasn't sure if I wanted to carry on with midwifery. It was quite difficult. Was finding work quite stressful. And I had a moment where I really felt God speak to me into this. So it was actually in between Manchester and Birmingham. I was lucky enough to go travelling with my friends, the girls, and we went around South America for a little bit. So there was a week where we had a bit of a difficult week, and we actually treated ourselves to a spa day in Chile. And this story just shows how God can use any situation to speak to you. So I'd gone off into a little room to have a massage from a Chilean lady. She spoke just Spanish, I spoke just English, so we couldn't communicate with each other at all. Interesting experience. Anyway, she was massaging, and at one point was like massaging my hands, and I really felt like God said to me, I'm calling you to hold women's hands. So both kind of physically, because I do that at work a lot, obviously, when women are in pain and things, but also kind of metaphorically, I felt like this is what he was calling for my life, for me to be able to help women. Lost my little place. So yeah, this gave me confidence to walk into my calling of working with and empowering women, and it kind of has become like a banner over my life. Gave me a bit more clarity and direction with the work that I do as well. But we'll come back to this later. So, skip forward, moved back to Birmingham, rebuilding the house, and it felt a bit easier this time because I was doing it with God, and it was like the walls came up quickly and I was feeling a bit better. I got a job as part of a home birth team, so it was midwifery, but we give all the care at home, deliver babies at people's houses, which was a bit of a testimony in itself. It was the first job that I applied for, and they called me before I even got back to my house and were like, we really want you. So that was amazing. I felt like God really answered my prayer there. And then I was looking, because I was moved in with my parents for a bit, I was looking for a house closer to work. Again, was praying about it. And one of my friends said, I've got a friend that rents out a room, I'll ask her for you. And then she asked a friend, and she said, sadly, I've got a tenant living there at the moment. And then that afternoon, the tenant said, I've actually got to go, I'm moving back to, I think it was America. So that day, the house became free and I could move in. So again, that was a real testament to me of God answering my prayer. I moved into the house, I was working in the home birth team, did a year working there. I joined a church in Birmingham, made lots of Christian friends, which was amazing. Starting to feel really comfortable and I'm getting somewhere. then kind of felt like God was telling me that this was coming to an end and that there was something else around the corner and I needed to hand my notice in. So I did, which was really scary. But this led to me getting the opportunity to go to South Africa and work as a midwife out there for a couple of months. And this just came through a conversation with a friend, and they said, oh, you should speak to Kathy, who's a Christian midwife working in South Africa, and just see if she'll have you. And then I just pushed a few doors and everything kind of fell into place. So yeah, I had the most amazing time there. And I'll tell you one quick story from my time out there in South Africa. So I was doing clinics with Kathy and delivering babies and all of that fun stuff, but then also going to the church that she went to with her husband. And the church had like a little charity where they go out into, they call them townships, so it's kind of like poorer areas, more slightly more dangerous, but where there's like a real need. And they do work with the communities there, so they help them to get work and help them learn how to farm, they play with kids and things. So I was doing a day with them, and we were actually just like going around people's houses and chatting to them and telling them a bit about Jesus, just sort of letting them get to know us really. And we went into this one lady's home, and she was like a strong, very matriarchal figure, South African lady. And she had a problem with her bones that she'd had for years, and it meant she couldn't leave the house. So she was saying, I can't take my kids to school, I can't get to church because I can't leave, I'm in pain all the time. And then we started talking to her a little bit about Jesus via a translator. And the lady I was with said she just had like a sense there was something else going on there sort of spiritually. So she asked a few questions. And in South Africa, or certain parts at least, it's quite common to like use witch doctors in sort of ancestral worship and things like that. So kind of like a whole sort of spiritual side that, isn't great. So we asked her a bit about this, and it turns out she'd gone to a witch doctor to try and be healed, and she was wearing these special coloured clothes that she thought were going to heal her, and she was investing all this time and money in this witch doctor. And as she began to speak, she just broke down and burst into tears, and I ended up like crouched down on the floor next to her, holding her hand for like the next hour. And we spoke to her about Jesus, and we said, Jesus is the only way to life, and he wants to heal you and be in your life, and for you to let go of these other things that aren't helping you. And this lady gave her life to Jesus, and it was amazing, and she was so full of joy. But it really struck me in that moment because I was sat there holding her hand, and it took me back to that picture that I'd had when I was having my massage in Chile, where God said, I'm calling you to hold women's hands, and down the line here I was literally doing that. So yeah, this for me was a moment of really seeing the fruit that God had been growing in me, being able to help others, and like I was able to play a part in someone encountering Jesus in that moment. So yeah, I came back from South Africa in May. I was unsure of a plan of what to do next. Had a good few months of asking God and really trusting that he had the next steps. This was a really challenging time for me in a lot of ways. I learned a lot about the pride that I have because I'd moved back in with my parents after 7 years and was like technically not employed on a long-term contract. I was just doing bank shifts at the hospital I was at before. So, when you kind of speak to your friends and they say, oh, I'm getting married and buying a house and all of these different things, getting a promotion, and I was like, oh gosh, I'm 25 and I'm back with my parents, and so God really challenged me on, well, does that matter? This is where I'm calling you to be. Anyway, so was at home, all of that going on, and my dad actually got an email from this charity called Samaritan's Purse, and some of you guys might know them because do you ever send the shoe boxes off at Christmas time to kids in other parts of the world? So it's the same charity. They put out a job application for a job as a midwife and being on call for like disasters around the world, so like war zones, and if there's a hurricane somewhere and they need help after that's happened, then I would go out as a midwife as part of a team and go and help there. So I applied for that job and got it, which was amazing, just had the training. It's something that feels makes me really excited. And I'm also working at the hospital in between that I was at before. So yeah, hopefully this will enable me to continue encountering Jesus myself as I stay rooted in him, and then to help others encounter Jesus through the fruit that he's growing in me. So that's a little bit about my story. If anyone wants to ask me any questions or more about all of that afterwards, feel free to grab me. But just thought I'd go through a few practical things for you to take home with you after all of that. Okay, so how do we keep ourselves rooted in the river and encounter Jesus each day? That sounds very, very simple, but by spending time with him and also people that love him. So we can do this through prayer. Prayer is so important. Becoming familiar with his voice. Prayer is something that should be a lifestyle and something that we can use to really petition with God and ask him things, not just lightly and thinking oh, well, it's not going to happen. It's a powerful thing. We have a real tool. So yeah, prayer. And then also studying his word. There's a passage in the Bible, Ephesians 6, that talks about the armour of God. Quick hand if you know the armour of God passage in the Bible. A few of you. So it talks about all these different things we need to clothe ourselves with. And the only part of it that's a weapon is so the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. So I just think it's really interesting that our only weapon in the spiritual battle that we're in is the Bible. So important. It's going to help us in our fight. Where have I got to? Yeah, so prayer, reading the Bible, and just kind of finding a way that works for you. So if you are someone that really enjoys studying and sitting down and reading through loads of passages at a time, then do that. That might not be for everyone, so don't put that pressure on yourself. Find a way where it can be sustainable for you and you're actually going to enjoy it. If you like waking up, having a little coffee in the morning, then read your Bible and have a prayer with your coffee. Do you know what I mean? So find something that works for you. It doesn't have to be really, really difficult for it to be holy. So find something that works for you in that. And then also Christian community. So investing time in things like this, where there's people around you that love God. So church, YF, and friends that can pray for you. If you're having a hard time or just need advice on anything, you can bring them a text and say, oh, can you pray about this? And making that normal in your friendships as well. Friends that can keep you accountable, and also dream big for your life. When sometimes you can't see something for yourself and you have friends that are no, I see this for you, you'd be really good at that. Make sure you've got those people around you. And then also just sharing your journey with your non-Christian friends as well, and putting yourself in a position where they might be able to encounter Jesus through you. So sharing the good, sharing the bad, sharing what you're learning, and just being honest with them about what it's like to be a Christian. Next little practical point, hold things loosely in your hands. This might sound a bit funny, but I mean not getting stuck on prioritising other things before God. Maybe it's your status, like I was talking about pride earlier. Maybe it's your grades, thinking about a future career, relationships even. Sometimes we can hold on to these things too tightly and they get in the way of us and God. I'm not saying that they're all bad things, but when they take the place of him, then they can be. It's like when I had to give up my midwifery job in Manchester, and the city that I loved and the relationship I was in. It won't always be so dramatic as that. But these have started taking the place of God in my life, and I needed to make some readjustments. It's all about leaning into him and trusting him just for the next step, rather than trying to do it ourselves. There's a psalm that says that God's a lamp to our feet and a light to our path, and I always really like that image, because it's like God's just showing us enough light to take the next step, and then the next step, almost like you're in pitch black and you've just got your phone torch. You can see just in front of you, and then just in front of you. And sometimes if we saw the whole picture, the whole path ahead of us, we wouldn't walk down it because we're thinking, oh my gosh, that looks terrifying. So yeah, God just shows us enough to keep us going, one step at a time, which means you really need to lean on him. Next point, dream big. It's a real adventure being a Christian. You never know where it's going to lead. I definitely didn't think I'd be flown out to Ukraine and delivering babies out there, but it looks like that's where I'm going. So yeah, you never know where it's going to lead, but don't put a cap on God and what he can do. He's dreaming bigger for your life than you are at the moment. There could be small moments in your life now, like me having that massage and chilling, or just things that you feel are really mundane, boring, that God has specifically put in place for something that he has for you down the line. And then my last point, remember it's not about us. So the mango tree doesn't know what a mango tastes like. Our job is to make sure that we're rooted in the river, that we're plugged into Jesus, we're spending time with him, and then we will grow fruit and let him do the rest. And that's everything. Thank you, guys. And if anyone wants to chat about any of that or pray together at the end, I'll be around for a little bit, so just let me know.
Thank you, Ellie. We're going to have one more song, so we're going to have the band back up, please.
prodigal. I don't wanna lose my soul, chasing after things that don't lead me straight to you. I don't wanna lose my gaze when I meet you face to face. Well done, welcome home. Now I'm running home like the prodigal. Oh, I'm lost in a feeling that I ain't from this world. That going back to Eden ain't gonna be easy, but it leads me straight to you. Now I'm running home like a prodigal. Lost in a feeling that I ain't from this world. That going back to Eden ain't gonna be easy, but it leads me straight to you. Now I'm running home like the prodigal.
Well